So what does this assorted pieces of stuff have to do with this? If you remember from a previous video, the last thing I said is the fan in the convection oven quit. So we took it apart, checked all the wiring was fine. Decided that the motor was hot, so we decided, well, maybe the motor was kicking off because it has a thermal protection in it. They do actually still make that motor, but they don't stock it. So I went over to Tractor Supply and bought a equivalent motor. It's not the same. This one has a capacitor start on it, the other one doesn't. I'm not sure what the differences are. The guy that sells the real motor was real honest and said it really shouldn't make any difference. So this is a thermal protected motor that we put in here that is specifically meant for blowers, HVAC applications. And we ran it through a cycle of outgassing at 500 degrees, and that worked fine. And then we ran 2 sets of powder coat. We're doing brackets, getting cars pretty. Ran 2 sets of brackets, and in the second set, the motor quit again. And I let it sit, it cooled off, started, runs fine. And actually it's extremely quiet. So we think what's happening, which is different from what I had before, was this sat out in the open. There was nothing in back of it. The whole bottom of this thing is a big grate in the back, and I'll show you that. I don't think it's getting enough ventilation. So this is the project. So what these pieces all have in common were an idea to try to keep, and this is the motor that was in there, and the bearing has a little noise in it. I mean, you can't hear it on the camera, but it does have noise in it. You can feel it. So it was ready to go. Fasco is the name brand, and like I said, the part is still available. So we replaced that. Now this was a blower motor that I bought that I was going to use to pump cool air out onto our 3-season porch to extend the season. It was such a beautiful porch. And I wanted to be able to suck air out of the air conditioning and blow it out on the porch to try to keep it cool and heat in the winter, just to extend it a little bit. I never got that project done. So what I'm going to do is take this fan and mount it on the side, outside of the oven, on the bottom, and have it blow air on the motor. Now, the way that oven is set up is this motor is mounted vertically like that. Then there's a big bracket that goes like this. So I want to blow the air on this side. I want to blow the air on the motor. Let's go back to the oven. So a couple things come into play here. This motor is mounted inside here on a bracket like this. It's hanging like that. So we can't blow air in on it from this way because the bracket's going to be in the way. So we got to blow the air in this way. And that kind of is a bummer because this was a nice place to put the welder. But what we're going to do, and it may solve some problems, is we're going to take the welder and we're going to put it over here. We're going to slide the oven down a little bit. And I actually slid it this way to get the welder in there. And what happened, when I slid the oven this way to get room for the welder, the pipe is no longer straight. So now if we move the oven back that way, put the welder over here, and hang the blower out that side, and there's already this switch here, that kind of solves all the problems. The blower will come in and blow right on the motor. Hopefully this is a solution, and that's the project for today. There's the blower. That's the inside. We're going to mount the blower there. And what we want to do is blow on that motor right there. Now the inside of this is actually pretty simple. This whole thing right here is just a timing circuit to make the red light on top of the oven go on. Doesn't turn it off, it just turns the red light on. This is a switch that turns the heating element on. It's just a transistor. That is a Celsius temperature control, takes a P-type I believe. That was originally in here and I converted it to Fahrenheit, but the controller that I got didn't have a 12 volt power supply in it to switch that switch on and off. So I kept this and I'm using it just as a power supply. That thing back there is a high temperature trip. If the oven gets too hot, it trips and turns the whole thing off. So this is a pretty straightforward task. We're going to drill a hole in that wall opposite that motor and some holes for some bolts and wire it in and try it out. Battery dead.
It's not helpful.
All right, clean that up a little bit. There we go. Now we'll do a test fit. We need to do some wiring to hook this motor up. And what I want to do is make it as neat as possible. And one trick is to twist all these wires together. It actually makes a pretty nice harness. So that'll make a fairly neat harness. So let's get working on that. I like to leave lots of wire and then you can always cut it off later. We'll come back and connect these. We got to get this wire through the cabinet and inside the oven, not the heated part. And I'm going to drill a hole here and put a grommet there and just pass the wire right through there. Perfect fit. So now, and the first mount. I wonder how many times I'll actually have to mount this. let's take a look at the guts. As you may have guessed, this is not the first time that I've had to go into this thing and fix things. Okay. So now, what I got to do is I have to find 110 in here. And this is 220, I got to find 110. There's going to be two 110 legs or two 120 legs. And what I'll do is open the back junction box and follow the lines to here, and then I'll find where those lines are split. What we've got here is a 240 oven. The oven runs on 240 volts. And the way 240 works is you have 120 on one side, 120 on the other side, and a neutral in the center. That fan we installed is 120, so we had to pick up 120 somewhere in here, and we want it to be switched so it only goes on when we turn the oven on. Now I followed those wires, and I'm being careful because the oven is on here, it's hot. So by hot I mean it's electrically hot. So I followed those lines, it goes back to the junction box, and those are the three legs. And we can prove that by, if I go here and here, I get 120, and if I go right there, I get 119, and if I go across the two legs, I get 240. So I can pick up the common right here. This is the common because this is 110 or 120, and this is 120. Now, this is the main switch here, and it goes to the magnetic switch here. So if I go to one side here, so if I go here to common, I'll get, I'm going to make a contact. Oh, it's not turned on. So there's nothing going there right now. But if I turn it on and go from there to there, I get 118. And that's because of the load of the heating element on here. It's actually drawing the voltage down a little bit. So that's where my contact points are. I'm going to go one side of that motor is going to go there. The other side of the motor is going to go there. When you turn the oven on, that fan will go on. Here we go. This is the end of the project. It is now wired in, the fan. I'll show you the fan itself. It's just bolted on the side of the oven. And here's the wiring. So it comes in, and I tried to be as neat as possible, and I think it looks better than it has in a while. So the next thing to do is to turn it on. Now there is a high temperature alarm that comes on sometimes when you turn it on, which is what that is. So we hit the reset button. And now the oven itself is on, and the new blower motor is running, and this is running, and it's blowing air directly on the motor. So, and it's moving a lot of air. So it will definitely be cooler down there, and if what I think is the problem, and that's it's not getting enough ventilation up against the wall, it's certainly going to get ventilation now. Only time will tell whether it works. The oven is back together. It's quieter than it's ever been, but it still makes little tiny noises that I'd like to get sorted out. There's a little squeak over here someplace, but it's actually quieter than it's ever been. So it's been run through a couple heat cycles. It's actually still warm. Seems to be working okay. We'll keep you updated on that. This project ended up being more than just working on the oven. I moved this dust booth down a little bit so I could get my TIG welder there, and then this took up some space, and then I wanted to get the MIG in here, so I ended up taking a foot and a half off that table, which means all the ductwork changed, so I put spacers and cut so all the pipes are vertical again. And by doing that, I could leave all the signs and everything centered above all the toolboxes without having to play with those. So I think this is pretty much how this is going to stay pretty permanently. I don't think I'll be moving anything else. But thanks for watching. I think the oven is fixed.